I've been thinking a lot lately about the role of a newspaper in a community, what it means to be a good neighbor, and what it means to be a good citizen of democracy. As the editor of the Herald-Times newspaper here in Bloomington, it appears to me these things intersect. What would you think if I told you there's one simple thing you could do today to become a better citizen and a better neighbor? In 2021, my husband and I bought a house on Bloomington's east side. I grew up in rural Iowa, he on the coast of Oregon. For both of us, this was the first time we were living in a real neighborhood, with couples strolling down the sidewalk and children riding scooters to the park. I searched for information about our new surroundings and found and joined a neighborhood Facebook page. Here, my new neighbors posted reports of lost animals, found mittens, and things they wanted to give away. It's where I learned about our neighborhood association. Throughout 2022, the woman who was leading the neighborhood association posted increasingly pleading calls for someone, anyone, to step forward and take over as president. I messaged this woman and said I was thinking about volunteering myself. From then on, it was a done deal. All I had to do was show up at the annual meeting, and I was going to be the next president of this organization that advocates for our neighborhood's interests and organizes activities that help us to connect. When I told my husband that I was now the neighborhood association president, he said, "Why would you do that?" Indeed, why would I do that? I have next to nothing in common with the people I live around. We don't get together for dinner parties or come from the same faith traditions or even the same country in many cases. One reason I step forward is because I read my local newspaper. This is Robert Putnam. He's an American political scientist whose research recently was revived by a Netflix documentary titled Join or Die. Putnam spent most of his career studying what community means and how it influences democracy. Through his research, Putnam found that people who read the news trust their neighbors more, like my next-door neighbor, Karen. When I moved into the neighborhood, Karen didn't know very many of her neighbors. She was one of the first residents of the neighborhood, but time and age had left her less connected to her community. So when I introduced myself, it became pretty clear that she did not know people well enough to ask them to help her clear her snow. So I started clearing the snow in front of Karen's house the year I moved in. My first year as neighborhood association president, I posted to our neighborhood Facebook page that I was going to clear Karen's snow because that's the kind of neighborhood I want to live in. That was a few years ago, and now, sometimes someone else gets there first. I honestly never thought I was going to have competition to clear someone else's sidewalk. So I told you a little bit about one of my neighbors, and now I'd like to know whether you know yours. I'd like you to raise your hand if you know your next-door neighbor's first name. All right, Bloomington, I am proud of you. Keep your hand up if you know that person's last name. Okay. Keep your hand raised if you also know that person's phone number. Okay, this one's hard. Keep your hand up if you have a key to their house or they have a key to yours. That's real trust, right? Don't feel bad. I can't even raise my hand for that. But do you ever wonder, if something happened to you, would your neighbors notice? This is Alan Backler, another of my neighbors. When the Herald-Times wrote this article, Alan's wife was on the neighborhood association board. I had met Alan at a number of neighborhood events, but I had no idea he was part of this aging group of passionate filmmakers known as the Three Stooges. Reading about Alan's work to document Civil War history in our state made me proud to call him my neighbor. And when Alan unexpectedly died late last year, we, his neighbors, we noticed. Local newspapers introduce us to our neighbors and tell us what makes them extraordinary. Newspapers help to define our community's culture. My neighbor Karen had lost touch with the people who lived closest to her. She was even fearful of people who came to her door. And it's hard to get to know our neighbors when we're disconnected from our community. Connecting people to their community is something local newspapers have always done. And finding our community can be as easy as reading a newspaper article. This is Natasha Zuidam, a woman from South Africa who opens her home at the holidays to feed anybody who is lonely and in need of a special meal. Last year, the Herald Times shared Natasha's invitation to pull up a seat at her table for a lunch after Christmas. Thousands of people read our story. And through it, a couple from the Monrovia area found the community they had been missing. As a surprise, a man brought his wife, who was also from South Africa, to Natasha's for lunch. The women were able to speak Afrikaans, their native language, for the first time in years. Community can be all kinds of things. Putnam coined this term social capital to refer to any kind of community that creates a connection between us and other people. We get this social capital by joining just about any kind of club. That could be volunteering in a soup kitchen or being a member of the Lions or Rotary, participating on a bowling league, or simply reading the newspaper. When we socialize with people who have different viewpoints and life experiences, we broaden our discussion networks. And when we are exposed to more people and more ideas, we're more likely to seek out trusted information sources. And while trust in institutions has been eroding for decades, and demonizing the media is certainly in vogue, people draw a distinction between their local newspaper and everything else that the media refers to. In a Pew Research Center study published last year, found that 7 in 10 people say they trust their local media to report news accurately. That same study found 2/3 of people who say they feel very attached to their communities think that local news is very or extremely important. So when we love our community and we know our neighbors, we think of local news as essential. In a different study, 87% of newspaper readers said that they feel like have a responsibility to shape the future of their communities. Unfortunately, reporting in the Washington Post tells us we have lost half of all reporting and editing jobs at local newspapers since 2000. That means fewer opportunities for us to grow our social networks, fewer stories about the arts, and fewer features about regular people like Alan and Natasha. One measure of community involvement is civic engagement. In his book, Putnam says that in 1973, most people said they had signed a petition, written a letter to Congress or a letter to the editor, made a speech, or written a newspaper or magazine article. And by 1994, most Americans said they had done none of those things. How would you measure your own civic engagement? I'm going to add to Putnam's list attended a public meeting before I ask you how many of you have done one of these things in the past year. So how do you shape a community? There's obvious things like running for office or sitting on the board of a nonprofit, but writing your congressman, your senator, or your representative, or adding your voice during a public comment at a government meeting also helps to shape your community. And when you read your local newspaper, you find out what's happening around you and are more likely to feel compelled to get involved, whether that means sending a check to a nonprofit doing good work or showing up at a public meeting to tell your elected representatives what you think of their ideas. When we start making judgments from the same set of basic facts, we are more equal. And that makes it harder for people making decisions to trample on us or to maybe erect a monolith that we're all disgusted by. We can rise up, we can take collective action, and we can organize. We can make change in a better society for every one of us. Now I want to address a flaw, both in Putnam's research and in newspapers in general. Putnam picked what, for a white cis male, might have been an idealized time period as the pinnacle of American civic life, but the 1950s were not great times for women, people of color, or people with varied sexual identities. And since newspapers are a reflection of our society in the moment, they too lacked the inclusivity that we expect today's institutions to embody. And while there's still a long way to go, news organizations have recognized these failings and are actively working to improve both inclusivity and diversity. When you engage with your local paper, especially as a historically underrepresented person, you can make the information in your paper a more accurate record of our society as it is today. Maybe you've never thought of engaging with a paper. What does that even mean? You could write a letter to the editor or a column, submit a news tip, or simply be willing to be interviewed. Representation matters, and the wider the variety of voices in the newspaper, the greater our chances at connecting across our divides. There are lots of ways we're different. Case in point, older generations tend to be more regular newspaper readers and more civically engaged. Pew Center studies find that half of all people under 50 are getting their news online. And younger people tend to look on Snapchat and TikTok, Instagram, or Reddit for information rather than trusted traditional news sources. On social media, it can be awfully difficult to figure out what's true, which may help to explain why on Election Day 2024, searches for "Did Joe Biden drop out?" were trending on Google. Yeah, prior to Election Day, there were virtually no matching searches, and Joe Biden did drop out 5 months before the election. Reading a newspaper is a lifelong habit that you can start building today, and it doesn't matter how you choose to access it. It can have a profound impact on how you view your community and the people you share it with. I leave you with these final thoughts. What kind of citizen do you want to be? What kind of community do you want to help build? And how often do you turn to your local newspaper for information about what's happening in your town? One simple act can put you on the path to being a better participant in democracy and helping to build the society that you want to live in. So become a better neighbor and a better citizen. It's as easy as doing your part to make sure that local news doesn't disappear from your town.